This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 573 with guest Dan LeFebvre, recorded on May 18th, 2023. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way in your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in a beautiful Bellevue, Nebraska. I know I'm in a hoodie, but I was outside mowing the lawn today. Sarah keeps the air conditioning pretty chilly in the house, so I threw a hoodie on. Beautiful weather. Of course, we post the show with some world-class show notes out at the AverageGuy.tv. Of course, this episode affiliate sponsor, Nespresso. Use the code. We've been talking about it, MQU328. Use that code. Get $40 off your first machine if you don't have one, a free capsule dispenser, and stop drinking bad coffee. Dan LeFebvre, do you drink coffee? Are you a coffee guy? And how do you get the best coffee? How do you get the best coffee?
I prefer manual right now, actually, either like a French press or I have an AeroPress or even just a pour over. I had machines at my daughter has an Nespresso and she absolutely loves it.
Yeah.
I haven't had one myself. The machines that I have had since died, and I've decided to go with just manual. I'm going to make it.
No, right on. It depends on the day. Sometimes I'm perking it.
Yep.
Sometimes in most work mornings when I'm driving in, it's just easier to throw a pod in. I have one of the old school machines and it's just lasting me forever. I keep hoping it'll break so I can get a new one. That's how you get machines to last forever, right? You tell them they're going to get replaced and then they never break, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a coffee machine that lasted for like 10 years and it was great. And then it died. I got a new one that was it ground the beans and it made, it was like, an all-in-one fancy thing. And then it died like 2 months later. And I was like, I'm just going to go manual. I'm not going to buy anything new right now.
Yeah, no, right on. And it's a great way to make coffee. For people who are drinking bad coffee, just stop. Head over to Nespresso.com, MQU328 when you're checking out, $40 off that first machine, and to stop drinking bad coffee. Big thanks to Marv B, who joined us last week. Had a lot of fun discussion around that as well. Always great to have on Marv. So Marv, thanks for coming back. Big thanks to our Patreon subscribers. And speaking of that, we got a voicemail from Kyle this week. Dan, 2 weeks ago, Jay Franzi was on the show. We were talking about fire pits. You admitted it to me. You're not a fire pit guy, but you'll enjoy a friend's fire pit, right?
I will enjoy a friend's fire pit. Yes, for sure. 100%. I mean, I'm down with that for sure.
the best kind of fire pit is a friend's fire pit.
Exactly.
Right, for you, and that's okay. But Kyle had called in. Again, if you go to my pod page, which is homegadgetgeeks.com is where you go. You can leave a message. Kyle left us a message, and Dan, I'm going to ask you what you think too. Here's Kyle's message.
Hey, I was listening to the conversation with Jay about the fire pit, and it sounded like the area that he had to work with was kind of small. So I was wondering if maybe it would make more sense to put the fire pit a lot closer to the lake, and then you'd basically have like 180 degrees half circle around where you could sit around it, or maybe pull it back just a little bit and have 200 degrees or something, but that might give a lot more space to put.
Yeah, and it's only a 30-second message, and so it stopped right there. But I think we get the point. I built a fire pit and we go 360 around it. Kyle was like, well, if you run out of room, move the fire pit maybe down to the lake to get Dan, in the fire pits, when you're hanging out at a friend's house, you kind of gravitate towards one side anyways, don't you? Don't you feel like that, like the non-smoke side is the one everybody ends up on?
Yeah, and that side, yeah. I mean, if it is 360, the benefit of that is if the smoke drifts, then so does everybody around it.
Yeah, that's true.
So that is a benefit to, being able to do 360.
Yeah.
But you work with the space that you have. If it doesn't make sense to do a 360, then I wouldn't try to force it if nothing else than just safety purposes.
Right. And I think I would put it, before I did any kind of fire pit, I would get a portable one and put it in the spot that I think I'm going to use it in, and then use it for a season.
Yeah, it's smart.
Right. Just so you kind of figure out, okay, where is the right place for
Yeah.
this before I do it. So
That's kind of what my parents had one, and that's kind of what they did was they did something temporary before actually building it out to be a permanent thing, like to make sure this is actually where we want it and this is everything. They did that for a year. Yeah, the season. That's smart.
Well, and I think with mine's 3 foot diameter, and it's pretty big. 3 foot's a lot. You can get a lot of wood in there. So when you have a lot of people out there, it's great. But when you just want a small fire, like I don't know if I need 3 feet to do a little tiny fire. So I'm actually thinking Menards here, our big box hardware store, has a 3 foot. It's 3 foot in diameter, but it makes it down, but it shrinks it down to a 2 foot inner center. So I could almost like a liner, I can lift it up and put it inside my 3 foot circle, but their inside liner is only 2 or 24 inches. So it allow me to have a smaller fire when I want. And then when the kids are over, we can just lift it out, put it somewhere else. And so it kind of gives me the best of both worlds. The good news, it's like $60 right now. So you're like, nice. That's actually for a fire pit liner that'll probably last a couple years. Yeah, sounds good. So anyways, nice. Kyle, thanks for calling in. And you can do that too, homegadgetgeeks.com. I always appreciate that. So thanks for doing that. And Kyle, always good to hear from you. It's probably time we get Kyle on the podcast. We haven't had him on a while. So Kyle, if you're interested, if you got something to talk about, reach out to me. We'd love to have you on the podcast. I mentioned Dan LeFebvre is here. Oh, before I do that, I bought a new solar generator this week. We're going to talk about it at the end of the show. So hang tight. We'll get to it. I got some updates on that as well. Dan LeFebvre is with us. Of course, Dan is from Based on a True Story Podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com. Been on the show a couple times. Always great to have you, Dan. Welcome back to Home Gadget Geeks.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I'm excited to chat about some of the updates since the last time. And kind of Based on a True Story Podcast, the last time you were on, you were doing just a couple shows a month. You've kind of ramped that up of late. I mean, what most podcasters do less, you're kind of doing more. Was there some kind of, did something change where you were like, oh, I got to cover this stuff? But before you answer that question, for those who don't know what Based on a True Story Podcast is, what is the podcast? The podcast, as the name kind of implies, it's about movies, and started with movies, ventured in TV shows as well. And it talks about the true story behind those. So, how much of Titanic actually happened, or how much, next I'm talking about Hotel Rwanda. I've got an interview around that, how much of that actually happened. So between those two, obviously the topics can vary a lot, as movies can, but try to focus on how much of a movie or TV show, and TV shows, covered like The Pacific or Band of Brothers and things like that, to talk about how much of them actually happened. And yeah, I have ramped up this year. That is true.
Any reason why? Were you just bored, or
no? There's two key reasons why. The first one was I love doing the interviews. I absolutely love that. And it gives me the chance to pick the mind of an expert and somebody who has spent decades focusing on a single topic, and something that I could never do for, as I mentioned, so much variety in the topics. So I love that. And I don't want to stop doing that. But the downside to doing any sort of interview is it's on their schedule. And there are at any given time, I've got dozens of guests that are on various stages of they're interested, or no, but then I want to reach back out to them because later on it's a yes. I've had people I've reached back out to a year later, and it was a no then because they're working on a book, but now it's a yes because they want to promote that book, things like that. So there's a lot of logistics involved in that. And so I had the idea towards the end of last year to one thing with a history show is there's, this day in history.
Right.
And I thought it would be fun to do something that I could do without anybody else. And this kind of throws back to when I originally started the show. It was just me, a narrative style with just myself, that I wasn't doing interviews. And it was a similar reason with that. At that point, I started the show part-time outside of a full-time job. and I couldn't do interviews because I just couldn't with my schedule. And so for another, I could still do the interviews, but I want to be able to do something that is just on my own, just almost kind of throwing back to the, the original style of just myself and kind of doing a little narrative. And so I had the idea of, what if we looked at what happened instead of every day, because there aren't movies that cover every single day in history. I did some research into that, and that's not really feasible for every single day of the year. But every week, there's something that gets covered. Sometimes it's obscure, sometimes it's much bigger than others, but every week there's at least something. And so that's kind of why I decided, hey, let's give it a shot, see how it goes.
So you've been doing weekly episodes where you cover like, hey, this week, Band of Brothers, Operation Finale, and Amazing Grace. Those are 3 topics. So you took an hour's worth or maybe more worth of content and made that available. Is that what you're doing? You're making that available, or is it all original content?
It's all original content. Yeah. So if it's a movie that I've covered before, like those, I have covered those, Band of Brothers and Operation Finale and Amazing Grace. I've covered those. So I kind of default to those if I have covered the full topic, because then I can say, hey, learn the whole true story. Yeah. But for the weekly episodes, I just focus on a single event. The Amazing Grace one is a good example. That's William Wilberforce with the abolition of slavery, and it talks about just one speech that he gave, and it's just really just a couple minutes in the movie. And the movie doesn't necessarily mention that this is exactly when this time was. Sometimes the movie says this is the day and that kind of thing. Sometimes it doesn't. But we know from watching it, we know from history, the text, the dialogue that is said versus, the historical text of what was said. That one in particular, they didn't really transcribe everything, but based on people who were there, you have a pretty good idea that this is what they're talking about. This happened this day. And so I think it's kind of fun to see. It's almost kind of in my mind too, a historical, movie recommendation. If you're looking for something to watch, a movie to watch this week, here's a few options of things that actually happened this week, and learn something new.
Do you recommend they watch the movie first, then listen to your podcast, or listen to the podcast first, then watch the movie?
I leave that up to I'll leave that up to the listener. Personally, I prefer to watch the movie first, because then I have an idea of, like, as I'm in the weekly episodes, I kind of describe specifically, this is the scene that we're seeing. I try to describe it as well as I can, as to give almost, the theater of the mind, that kind of aspect. But sometimes you don't want to watch the movie. You just want to learn about the event, and that's perfectly fine too.
I would rather learn as much about the movie first, then go watch. Just my personality, and then go watch it. And I actually enjoy it more, like, because I can nerd out on a little bit more. And I'm like, oh no, that's not. It's interesting. When Lord of the Rings came out, I didn't read any of the books, and of course, that's not based on a true story. But
I do have episodes on that, though.
yeah, I know you do. But so I remember going to the theaters the first time, and my wife, who read all the books like 3 times, was saying, whispering in my ear, okay, this is important because of this, and this is important because of that. So then we went back, and she told me all those things, and then I watched the movies again, and it was, for me, so much richer to do it that way. So I'm not I'm a guy who doesn't care if it gets spoiled. In fact, in some regards, I like it kind of spoiled before it gets like I don't. Yeah, there's some movies I go in and I'm I'm kind of like, when I saw Thor Ragnarok, again, not based on a true story, but when I went and saw Thor Ragnarok, I didn't know it was a comedy. I was thinking, right. And okay, that's the kind of surprise I really enjoyed. From a story standpoint, I'd rather kind of get all the details first and then go in and critically watch. Does that make sense? Like critically watch the movie?
Oh, it definitely does. And I think even it depends on the movie sometimes too, because some events, Titanic, I use that as an example because, one of the most popular movies of all time. Everybody knows what's going to happen. I mean, maybe it's a spoiler alert to some, but it sinks at the end. And so, you know what's going to happen. And so I could see how that would be, beneficial to knowing some of those details going into it. But maybe a movie like Amazing Grace, honestly, I had never seen it before I started researching it years ago for the original episode, and it's not really a popular movie. So it wouldn't surprise me if people just haven't seen it and you want to learn more about it and then, see it portrayed on screen. So I think both ways works.
Well, and sometimes I don't mind watching the movie, getting all the details about it, then going back and watching it again. Then it's, and to me, that's the kind of way I like to consume them. Yeah. You're covering Chernobyl, which was a 4-part Netflix, 5-part, 5-part. Yep. HBO, is that an HBO one?
HBO.
Yeah. It just give some teaser. Don't give anything away, but teaser close to. I mean, was it a pretty accurate representation?
Yeah, it's pretty accurate. Okay. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's pretty accurate. The biggest thing that I've done in that series, because it was so accurate, there's little things here and there. One of the main characters is like a composite character because there are hundreds of scientists and engineers that work on it. So that just wouldn't play well on screen. Things like that. And so obviously once you throw a composite character into there, Kumyuk is the character I'm referring to. Like there's going to be things that are made up when you have a character that's made up, but there, with that, the other side of it is there's just so much more detail. And so I try to throw in a lot more of that detail that is not covered because it's not one of the main characters. But there's just a lot more context to the story. So even in situations like that, where the story is accurate, it's not a documentary. It's still a drama. And so they're still telling a story. But there's still more to tell. And it was fascinating to dive into that and dive into it in great detail. 5 episodes for each one. So
I arrived in Germany, November of '86. Chernobyl happened earlier in that year, right? April.
Yeah.
Of that year. Yeah. So at the time, they were down. The Russians were downplaying this, right? They were like, well, it's not that bad, and we got it under control. And we know now radiation spread across Europe, and it's a good chance that I was exposed during that time to now lethal. No, absolutely, still here, but who knows what kind of health effects that had. But that's a very real story for me. I can't watch it. Like I can't. That's one of those I've tried watching those before. Those, and I don't know. I get too attached. It happened in real time for me.
Get it. Yeah.
Right. And I think about these people who went in there and lost their lives heroically.
Yeah.
It was a Cold War. It was the height of the Cold War. They were our enemy. But I go watch those things today and I just feel for many of them who gave their lives on that day, they knew they were dead.
Yep.
Right. And not only that, they were going to die horrifically. And, and yet they did what needed to be done to get it in the situation it needed to be in. So anyways, I just have a lot. I can't watch that movie.
I totally understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. It's a tough, it is a tough story when you look at it from that perspective. And even mentioning, how they were downplaying it. There were some instances in my research that it was kind of strange because they were trying to cover it up so much. There were people that were involved in the cleanup that didn't know as much as people outside of the Soviet Union because news had gotten out there and they were trying to cover up so much, and they controlled so much of the media and all that there were people who didn't know that they didn't know the severity of the situation until obviously it was too late. Right. It's a sad story.
It's a very sad story. We lived it a little bit when we were over there. But anyway, so thanks for covering that. I think certainly this is an issue not going to go away anytime soon. It's like 10,000 years or something before you can, and you're like, oh, well, okay, yeah, we've permanently messed that up for quite a while. Have you? Okay, so thinking about your podcast though, you're doing more podcasts this year than you've done in the past. That takes a little bit. Creating a podcast takes a ton of time. Mm-hmm. Have you found anything from an automation standpoint or a tool standpoint or to kind of help? We've been spending a lot of time thinking about AI, but have you found anything to kind of help you speed those up?
Yeah. So I've always been very templatized in my workflow to batch things out in how I do things. And lately, even, just this year, like with doing the weekly episodes, I've been trying to find new ways to do that and take advantage of things like AI to do that. And there's two key tools that I've used, and I can go into as much depth as you want to on this because I'm still in the process of figuring it out how well it's going to work with my particular workflow, because I already have an established workflow, and I like to work as non-destructively as possible. And a lot of these tools don't really lend themselves to that. But initially, I'll try. There's two key tools that I have found that do work for me. One is Descript, and the other one's called Autopod.fm, which is pretty new. So now that I'm doing, I also do video, right? And so Premiere is my key tool there. And what's cool is with Descript, you can import in there, and then it'll cut out the filler words, which cuts out a lot of things. But when you export as a Premiere file, it just gives you the XML, which really doesn't actually do the editing. So you have the source file, and then you basically have the XML that has the time codes of all the clips. And so I can go in there and start to edit that XML file to then pull off the full length. I ran into an issue with Descript that they didn't even know about. I reached out to their support. They had a 100 gigabyte limit on files, which I record in 4K. So my files go much larger than that. And so I have to compress it down, basically use a proxy in order to get those time codes and stuff. I am probably nerding out way too much on that, but this
is a nerd show.
That's true. So I figured out basically if I use a proxy on that to pretty much just get the time codes of the filler words, and then I can pull that into Premiere, and it automatically does the editing for me. And then once I do that, the cool thing about Autopod, which is an extension for Premiere, it cuts between different tracks, different video tracks,
different camera angles.
Correct. So I have you, Jim, and then myself. So I record all those on separate tracks, as well as I actually have. I'm not recording right now, but I have a 4K camera that I use to record a secondary track, so I can actually zoom in and out on my own, which is really the same, but it's higher quality. So I export at 1080. So with 4K, I have some room there to play with. And then Autopod, I should say, it uses AI to read the audio track to determine when that changes between the different people. And then it, similar to what we're used to in Zoom and all that, but it does all of that into Premiere and cuts that automatically. So it saves a lot of time. The biggest issue that I've come across, and I haven't figured it out quite yet, I realized that I am doing a lot more episodes, so I need to get back on those before I was finish playing with this. But the biggest issue that I came across is because I do multi-track, because I do multi-track, say the filler words for you on your track are going to be different than on my track. So those time codes don't match up. So my thought process is, I use a tool, I have used a tool in the past called Beyond Compare that compares text files and you can merge them together. So I was thinking it's just an XML file with the time codes. I should be able to merge those together and then get all of that to do that. I haven't played with that 100%, but that's kind of the direction I'm thinking of going to help. It's still some manual process, but it's a lot faster to get rid of a lot of those uhs and ums and things like that I spend a lot of time cutting out right now.
Yeah, and what I think for the average guy on this, now you're thinking about a production ready, so to speak, your production, production ready podcast. But I kind of think about the average person taking a bunch of home video. And they might be you might have several different cameras going on. Maybe mom's got one and dad's got one or whatever, right? And the ability to bring those in over a day, sync it all with timestamps, and then say to AI, hey, get the best, make a home video for me, so to speak. I'm using air quotes for home because that's what we used to call them. Nobody ever says home videos anymore. It's not even a thing anymore. But, and I think this is where AI actually gets really useful. You're just trying to take a bunch of video and bring it together and let AI make some sense out of it quickly. Could you do that? Sure. At the end of a long day, do you want to throw a bunch of video together and edit it for 3 hours? No, just let AI kind of figure it out, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I will say the key to that success, and at least with Autopod, and in my past with a lot of video editing, I have a background in doing a lot of that. And the audio is the key. which so even if it's scratch audio, record the audio, because that's what a lot of tools use to synchronize like the different cameras is the audio. And that's what clapboards are for. You see them in movies. That's all they're syncing the audio between different cameras. You hear that?
Yeah, we never knew this thing, right? It was coming down, was to give them. I never knew what that was for, but it's to give them that sync.
The clap,
sync.
Yeah, it's 100% what it is. Yeah, and so you can see that. You can see that in the waveform, but then the automated tools read that. Premiere has a great synchronization tool between audio and video, and so you could pull those in, synchronize that. It uses the audio track. You tell it which track you want to use, as the primary to synchronize, and it does a great job. So yeah, you can definitely do that for home videos. Just speed things up.
Yeah, just you could think like, hey, dump. Hey, I got a bunch of stuff I took during the day. Dump it in, synchronize it, and then make for me the best version. And man, you probably spin those out, a couple of those, to say, you make a couple of different versions of the day and make it for 5 minutes, and it'll generate something for you, right?
Yeah. AutoPad has a few different options, and it's in beta. It's like brand new.
Right.
When I first signed up for it, just a couple months ago, they didn't have a direct downloading. It was a link to a Dropbox, and that's how new they are, right? So it's brand new stuff. Yeah. So I'm sure they're only going to add new features, but considering how new it is, I found it to be pretty solid. It's simple what it does. It was simple. I'm sure there's a lot of tech behind the scenes, but it does a pretty solid job, and I'm excited to see where they go with it.
Yeah. Well, Google's been messing with this for a while, not really from an AI perspective, but you used to be able to dump a bunch of pictures in, and it would create a video for you of things kind of coming in and out. Pretty simplistic. I would think with adding the track, the audio track, and then it listening for things that are happening, like significant things that are happening in the conversation, in the video, and bringing those, getting the right camera and getting the focus in on it could be one of those interesting kind of things where it could do that really well for you, I would think.
Yeah. It doesn't, I haven't seen it do this yet, but with something, because it's also brand new in Premiere, but Premiere has started to add in features that Descript has with text-based editing, which with the latest version, you can actually you could transcribe it for a long time, but now you can take that transcription, edit the transcription, then it cuts the video. And since Autopod is a Premiere extension right now, maybe they'll add more, but right now it's Premiere first. It would be really interesting to see if they start to take advantage of that, to be able to say, because then in the text you could have, this is the important part I want to take advantage of, and then change the camera angles more in that section versus others, that kind of thing. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah. And I could also see a place in a lot of videos get edited this way now with the jump cut. Yeah. But I could see, so I'm taking, the hardest part about video is when I take the audio and I want to get the ums and ahs out of it, it's all jumpy.
Yeah.
And I don't want jump cuts. I'm not looking for that. This is where I think when, the deep fake technology, which has been abused in a lot of ways, but the deep fake to smoothen that out, to make it look like, this is where I think it can be used for good, where it takes that section, goes back to a point, goes forward to a point, then smooths out that edit so that it doesn't look like I don't all of a sudden, in the video, I don't all of a sudden jump, right? But it's kind of a smooth transition to it. Or you're looking at me, is that already happening? Is that available today? The way you're looking at me makes me think I can get it today.
No, I mean, I think honestly, an easier approach is to go back to old school video. I mean, what you're describing right there is the reason why B-roll exists. And true. So, with AI being able to generate stuff, like I think you could do do some text inputs to be like, generate me a video based on this. I think that might be easier than deepfake. If for no other reason, then you start to get into uncanny valley where it's like, it might be a little bit obvious that you have that cut.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to a point, but I have a feeling just cutting to B-roll. It's first thing I learned with video editing. B-roll is
B-roll covers the multitude of sins.
Oh yeah.
No. Well, and so, the average listener to this show, I'm just kind of thinking from an average guy perspective,
Sure.
Thinking, yeah, you may not have your own podcast or making your own movies or doing those kinds of things. But I think a lot of us, we're taking a lot of video on our phones. We're doing things with the family. We're organizing that data. We're uploading this to Facebook or whatever. And I think we're going to get to a spot, and there's a lot of tools to take care of it, but I think we're going to get to a spot where some of those tools are going to come down to the average guy, right? And allow us to do some pretty simple, like, hey, take this video and make some sense out of it, type deal, right?
Yeah, so, I think you look at just the past with technology. I mean, the video editing or Premiere or Photoshop or, something like that, just think, a few decades ago, the ability to edit photos was you got to manually cut them together and, because you're working on film and things like that. And, it's only a matter of time. This stuff is going to get better. And then we just need to figure out how we're going to use it to speed up our workflows or to improve them. I mean, the time it takes to do things might take the same amount of time, but you just end up with a much better result.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the 90s, when I was in college, I went to a Christian liberal arts school. They had a radio station. I did an interview. I sat with the producer who spliced that audio together on one of those machines where they would listen and, okay, we got to cut it here, pull it off, cut, splice, boom, put it down, send it through, right? And and reel to reel. And digital was coming, but it was super expensive. This would have been 94, probably 95. It was super expensive still. And like, think of what we do today into script.
Yeah.
And just how far we've come on that. So do you feel like, with where technology is going now, do you feel like that'll allow you to keep up this pace? Are you going to try and keep up this pace of the amount of podcasts you produce, or is it going to be something that's just a point in time and you'll go back to a more reasonable pace here in the future?
I like how you phrase that, more reasonable.
Hey, I look at what you do and I'm like, man, that is a lot of work. That is a lot from a guy who does a weekly podcast. That's a lot of work.
So I think I'll be able to. I mean, I haven't really incorporated. I've been playing with the AI automation stuff behind the scenes. So there definitely are ways that I'm able to get that done. A big part of that, like I mentioned, is batching and being able to work ahead. So at any given time, I'm working months ahead of time. So that really helps. The weekly episodes I can do all by myself, so I can do them at any time, and that really helps too. I've always, as far as I've gotten in the rhythm of doing 2 interviews or so per month, but I've always said that I will have them when I get them done, which is usually based on other people's schedules. So there have been months where I only have 1 interview, or some months I've had none. And a lot of that boils down to when I'm able to schedule them based on, and then, edit for that. So that was actually another smaller reason for doing the weekly episodes, to make sure that I still have content coming out, even if somebody's schedule doesn't quite work, with that. So it's I think I don't have an issue. I don't think I'll have an issue being able to maintain that pace. The interviews have always been something that are very dependent on the guests and their schedules and when they're able to get them done. I try to do at least 2 a month, but sometimes it doesn't work. Yeah.
You recently moved, and in a move, you discover a whole bunch. Like, first of all, you're like, I have too much junk, right? Right. I have too much junk.
Oh yeah.
But it is an opportunity to either repeat the sins of the past or mend the sins of the past, right? And listen, I'm guilty. I am super guilty of this. In fact, I have a new solar generator coming that I'm going to use as a UPS backup, and I have an opportunity to wire it in correctly. And I've been thinking lately, like, am I going to take the time to do it, or am I just going to get so excited I'm going to jam things in? Then once you have it working, you don't really want to mess with it, right? Okay. So you had an opportunity to do that. It sounds like you took the opportunity to maybe set things right. Tell me a little bit about the move, and what did you fix about your setup?
Yeah, I mean, my previous setup was very much what you what you mentioned. I got it working, and then it was like, well, it works. Now I have work to do. Why would I change this? Because it works. Because as soon as I change one thing, I'm gonna have to redo it all. So in this move, I finally did something I've wanted to do for years. I used to work at a company, a tech company, and kudos to the guy who owned that company, because he was super organized and he had little bins for everything. So if you needed a cable, go to the server room, and there's a bin for every single type of cable. And I've always wanted to do that. I've just never taken the time to do it. So with this move, I finally did that. It used to be where, I need a new USB-C or a micro USB or, whatever the cable is. If I can't find one, I'm just going to order one on Amazon and it'll be here. Okay, that's cool. It'll be here
Tomorrow,
later today or tomorrow, right? Depending on the timing.
Right.
If I need it right away, I'll go to Best Buy or Walmart or something, right? One of those places. Right. And so finally I went through and I organized everything. I have it organized, USB-C. I even have some micro. I have some, USB-A. Everything is organized. So if I need a cable, I now have way too many cables for each of those from the time that I bought them. But I'm organized. So, exactly. So if I need them, and there have been times where I'm like, oh, you know what? I need a cable. Go find it, and I just go get it. And it's been really nice. It's been really nice.
Did you get like a bin organized? Did you get like Home Depot or Office Depot?
Yeah, I went to Target and basically bought out all their little bins that they have. This was maybe a little OCD, but I wanted them to all look the same too. So I wanted to make sure that they were all the same. I have two. So I have this recording set up in this studio here, but I also have a photo studio in my place too. So because I do photography. And so that was another part of it too, because some chargers are for, photography stuff, for cameras, for that. And even with this, so, the cameras that I'm using here, you can't see them because I'm using them, but the cameras here, it's a camera, but it's not my photography camera. That's a different one. So the chargers are different. So I wanted to separate everything instead of having everything in one place. And it's been a mental relief to know, okay, what is this? I need this cable. It's recording based or it's tech based. Okay, it's over here. It's photography based. It's over here. And being able to find it within, a minute it's really nice.
It's pretty great, right? Charging cables are a mystery to me. Like I still don't there's all these different standards and wattage and I
have a bin of miscellaneous. I will admit that I have mostly the adapters. I mean, the cables themselves are usually if it's not USB, if it doesn't plug into the box, then it doesn't work. Yeah. But I do have a bin of miscellaneous adapters that I've kept, and then I set a reminder for a year from now. If I don't open this up, get rid of them, because it means it's something that I haven't used.
That's a good idea.
That sort of thing. There's also actually some tech that I have repurposed, like old laptop that I'm using for my printer server now, and a little micro PC that I'm using just to back up to Backblaze, things like that. I wasn't really using before because it was old tech, and I didn't. But I was like, if I'm going to move this, it better have a purpose. Yeah. What can I use this for? And it's been nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's a good exercise. I love that idea of a bin and tagging it. Like, okay, I don't know what this goes to. I'm going to take a little piece of blue tape and I'm going to put today's date on it. If I see this thing again and it's a year, it's gone, right? Yep. Type deal. Now that takes, you got to position things and have stuff, and I have a hard time letting go of stuff. I'm looking at right now a stack of 2.5-inch drives from laptops. Right, they range between 250 and maybe 500 gig. Yeah, so they're not that big, right? And they're maybe some of them are even 120. I can't get rid of them, Dan. Like I can't. Like what I need to do is drive a nail through all of them, and just turn them in, right? Get rid of them. But I have a hard time letting go of stuff like that.
The hard drives, yes, the hard drives. I'm right there with you. I kept the hard drives mostly because I know it's not just getting rid of them or recycling them. I need to do something else, drive the nail through them or, just to make sure. and I have a lot of them. I have a lot of them too from my parents. My dad has passed away, and so I have all of his hard drives, right? And so it's one of those things too of just those. Yes, I'm kind of the same. I have not gotten rid of those. Some of those even then I have repurposed those. Some of them that I know when I went through them, I know they're newer, and so I know that they work, and so I have repurposed them for various things. And that was nice too, because again, there have been times where I need a hard drive because I know I'm going off on a photo shoot and on set, and I don't have enough space on my MacBook to store all this. So I need a hard drive. But do I really have one that has enough space? Let me order one to make sure, you know? That kind of thing.
No, it's the sins of my collections are right. I can see them like right in front of me. And like, I still have I have a Light Scribe DVD drive that's sitting, but I can see it. I can see it from, am I ever going to put a Light Scribe DVD in a computer again and use it? Probably not. Probably not. Right.
I would say, I guess you never know, but I mean,
I keep one around. I think we have a VCR around here as well. So, yeah. Well, we all have our own technical debt problems, right? When we think about the things we keep for whatever reason. I am slowly, one thing at a time, getting rid of some stuff. In a move, it's also a time, and my number 2 son is really good at this, of redoing your cable management in a way that makes some sense. Did you get an opportunity in this move? Is it better now than it was before?
Oh yeah, for sure. So, I'm maybe embarrassed to mention this, but like you said before, you set it up and it works. That's great. And then you have, the cable that's just barely long enough. Like, I can't move this monitor because if I move it, then it's going to unplug everything, that kind of thing. And that's the way it was before. And so, I found I didn't have to, I had to buy a few cables, that were longer, but really I found some that were longer that just were amidst the stash of various things that gave me some more freedom. And that really helped, like with the setup you see behind me, being able to move things around a little bit more, position them a little bit more, make things nicer, which, I could have done before, and I would have, purchased more cables and done all that. But this was just as it did take some time. It took a few days to go through all that and sort it all out and organize it all and everything. But I think it was worth it.
Mm-hmm. You just got to slow down.
Yeah.
You got to take a moment once you get it all set up and say, here's my problem. I'm always monkeying around with things. Yeah. And so like, as soon as I tie things together, zip ties, whatever, I'm snapping them off to move some more things around. And then I'm like, why am I doing this if I'm just going to move it around all the time? Did you like zip tie things? Did you use Velcro? Did you do anything to kind of...
I used to zip tie things like that. And then I found like, I didn't want to cut them because I would be afraid that I would actually cut the cable, which I know is like, it's just, again, a matter of slowing down. But then I was like, and then I would like, do I really want to zip tie this again? Am I sure that I like this, or should I wait for a week to, make sure that I'm happy with this placement? And then I would just never get around to it. Yeah. So I've switched more to the Velcro ties because it's not that the zip ties are permanent, but they feel more permanent to me. I have to get a scissor and cut it and then replace it and all that. So I've switched more to that.
The other thing for me of getting cables up off the desk or whatever is just dust. And it's amazing how fast things get dusty. And I don't know about you, I use those dusting wand things, you put it on the end and then and man, it's so it is nice. I always keep one around. You go to move something and you're like, oh my God, what's living back there? Did somebody die back there? Type thing. But it gives me an opportunity. I always keep a few of those hidden, stashed in various spots so that when I'm pulling computers apart or whatever, I can quickly wipe off at least surfaces, right? And then sometimes get it. We have a little shop vac thing that then I can put a brush on the front, maybe brush off the dust, the filters or whatever to get that done. But so did you find are you keeping to your cable management in the new place, and does it feel good, and is it easy to maintain?
So far, yeah. Like I said, it's only really been a couple months. And so So far I have. I mean, the biggest changes that I've made are like adding the lights in the background that you can see there. I didn't have those when I first moved in. That was another thing I had to figure out with the lighting in the new space. Huh?
Those are all indirect. In other words, you've got them behind things or pointed at the wall, or
these guys. Yeah.
Those
are all accent, so you can't see. But in front, I've got lights because I've got photo and video lights and stuff like that. I've got LED panels that are doing light on me.
Right.
Again, I just kind of had to rethink it all, which means, rethinking things. I'm sure there's stuff that I'll want to change. It's just the nature of it, but
no, for sure.
For now I'm happy with it.
Are you using any Amazon devices or any smart controls, thinking about plugs for your monitors? I mean, I have my monitors grouped by studio and Gallup, right? I have this is work this way. This is me this way, or in the studio, right? So I can say, hey, a lady, turn on the Gallup monitors, or turn on the, are you using any automation for that?
Not in here, and by choice, because I don't want something to accidentally go off while I'm recording. Also because I do have a video doorbell, and I don't want somebody to push that and have it go off, in here. I would probably hear it. I use Google stuff. So, the Nest and things like that. So I might hear it in the other room if somebody did do that. But I don't have anything in here for that. I do use things around, the TV in the living room, stuff like that for automation to turn things on and off and things like that. But I tried to keep it pretty manual in here on purpose. So I have everything organized by power strips instead. And so the power strips are what I turn on off. So when I walk in here into the office, if I know I'm going to be recording, I turn those on. Otherwise, the overhead light is not on right now, but I could just flip that on if I'm just working in here. But if I'm actually need the lighting, I have it all set up, power strip, turn it on. And then, it's all manual. So that way there's not a interruption that I'm not used to.
Right on. I've actually used power strips, but I've put them into smart switches.
The smart switch, yeah.
And so, like the Gallup monitors, my work monitors that I use, they're all on a power strip, and then they all go into so I can say, turn on the Gallup monitors, and boom, they all come on. Right. I do find that super helpful, and I've got a home automation touch screen down here on the desk. It does make it easier to get everything shut off at night. Boom, 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 boom. It shuts off the overhead lights, studio lights go off, monitors all go off. Really, there's just one thing left, and that's the home automation touch screen. Then that's actually a manual button on top, and I just turn that off, and everything, for the most part, I mean, computers are still on, those kinds of things, but works that way. Sounds like and I get why you're not doing that, because you don't want them. I get that Saturday mornings when I'm podcasting with Dave Jackson. HelloFresh is delivered always during the show, and I hear in the Amazon device it's on this side right here, and it goes ding dong, someone's at the front door, and you're like, I didn't need to know that, but I want to know it during the day. I guess I could shut it off on Saturdays, but
it's a matter of remembering it, and that's my thing. I mean, my show is not live. But most of the guests that I have, I have them for a certain period of time, and that's it. And so I try to respect their time, and not have things go off in the middle of it. And so it's more my own thing of, if I have something in here that might go off, I'm not going to remember that it's turned on, and that just means it's my luck. It's just going to go off. And so I'm just going to remove all that.
Murphy's Law, right? Murphy's Law.
I also don't spend most of my time working in here, to be honest. I actually remote in. So these computers are so I use them, but I remote into them from other parts of the house. So,
it looks good. For not using it, it looks really good.
I mean, there's times where I do come in here. I used to use it a lot more. I still use the power of it. I do remote into it. But my cat wouldn't agree with me if I was in here all the time.
Got it.
And so I have to go out there and, spend time with him. And
right on.
That way he's not scratching at the door all the time.
Pets are important. Pets are very, very, very important. So no worries.
He almost knocked one of these over. That's why he's not allowed in here. That's why. That's why. So it's one of those. It's not like I would let him in here. He used to be able to come in the studio, but he almost. There were 3 different instances of him turning off the computer in the middle of things and losing work, and then he almost broke the. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, you wonder,
On his.
they're so graceful in other ways, but then your things, like you would think that button is really hard for a human to push.
I know.
And they somehow, on accident, turn off your computer. They're evil. Those cats, they're way smarter than we give them credit for. Dan, anything else that you learned in the move from a technology perspective? Those oftentimes really clarify things for us. Like a move is one of those clarifying moments where you're like, yeah, I'm not taking that with me. But anything else in the move that that you learned or that improved your tech?
I think more for me, it was finding ways to reuse things that I already had. Because I did have a lot of tech. The computer that I used to use to record now is actually, I repurposed that, and now it's in my photography studio. And so in there, I can see the shots live, right? Being able to preview those live, with whoever I'm shooting. And so doing that, and then I used a computer that I really wasn't using that much, that was a custom build that I did like back in 2010. I've upgraded it a few times, but that's my recording computer now, and because it's a little more powerful. So it's just repurposing things. Really, it kind of forced me to take a step back and be like, what am I using this for? Can I reuse it? Or if not, I'm going to get rid of it. I got rid of some things that I'm not using anymore. Kept the things that I am.
Do you have a hard time getting rid of cables? Like I always think,
cables,
I'm going to need this. I'm going to need
cables.
this.
Cables. Yeah. I can't tell you how many like XLR cables I have from things where really like from here to the mixing board that's pretty much the XLR need that I have. But I have, I used to do live video shoots and stuff like that, and go all the way across the room, like 100-foot. I have a 100-foot HDMI cable that I bought for a.
Isn't that the max of HDMI?
It's the max. It is the max, right? It was a live stream. They wanted to live on the screen there, right? And so where my camera was set up, it had to be over there. And so got the max that we could to get as far as I could for the angle, and it worked great. I haven't used it since, but it's 100-foot HDMI. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll need it sometime.
No, leave it in a box somewhere, and then when you actually need it, you're not going to be able to find it. Well,
but see, now I've organized things, so I can find it if I need to.
That's good.
I don't know if I'll need to, but I can.
Listen, I have enough XLR, and I don't even do that anymore. I used to DJ weddings and stuff like that, and then I used to travel with some musical groups. So I have enough XLR cables. I could circle the house in them, literally, maybe twice. And I'm like, why? But I have the hardest time letting that kind of stuff. I need to donate them to somebody or give them away, or like, hey, I did take some to work, and actually I have a whole bunch of work sitting in a bag that I'm like, I'm never going to use these things. I just need to get, and they're so cheap. Well, things are more expensive than they were before, but relatively they are still pretty cheap,
Yeah.
When you go to get them. Yeah. So,
yeah.
So last week's show, I had Marv B on here. We were talking about UPSs at the end of the show, and I had a question for him. I'll ask you. You've got a lot of gear. How do you have that? How do you have the power part backed up? What are you using? You're not just straight plugging it in, or what are you using for UPSs?
I'm using for not on everything, pretty much mostly just the box. Is what I have the UPS on. So it's just an old APC. Realistically, there were ones that the tech company that I worked for, when they shut down the office, it was easier for them to just throw everything out. So the IT guy was like, just take whatever you want. And so I grabbed some of those. And I have one monitor. So the primary monitor plugged into it. And then the box, and that's it. Other stuff, because I, with the power strips that I have for like the lights, I'm pointing at them, but the lights and the cameras and all that kind of stuff, because those power strips are only plugged in when I'm in here to record. I don't use any sort of a backup or anything on those. I don't really feel like I need that for the time they're on.
You don't have, in the short time you've been living there, you haven't had any power fluctuations, or sometimes the power drops for a moment, comes back. That was a real common problem here where I live. They fixed it. They've since fixed that. We had an underpowered transformer that they upgraded, I don't know, 6-7 years ago.
Yeah.
And that we're a 50s neighborhood. So I think we were still on a 50s transformer.
Not used to that powering this kind of tech you have now.
We'd blow that thing, the neighborhood would blow, it'd get real hot, and we just blow that thing every hot evening with just air conditioners, right? Type deal. We've got better with that. Well, okay, I'm not trying to guilt you. I'm not trying to say you should have more. It works for you, right? For what you're doing.
Yeah. I mean, I've got the essentials basically to where if the power goes out, then I'll have enough time to shut it off.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much how it is. In this area, there's not as many issues as where I used to live. I used to live in Tornado Alley in Oklahoma City.
Newsflash, you're not that far away from.
Well, fair point.
You're in
fair
Tulsa,
point.
Right? Okay.
In Tulsa. That's true. Although here it's far enough, and this is something when I worked for the Department of Defense, we had a meteorologist came in one of the safety briefings, and he basically explained that Oklahoma City is kind of unique because being in Tornado Alley because of the cool air from the Rockies and the Gulf of Mexico, the warm air from the Gulf of Mexico just happens to hit right over OKC, which is why you get all those storms. So we get storms here, but they're not nearly the amount, or like it's not the hail, the tornadoes almost every single time. I mean, there's still a chance, of course, but it's every storm in OKC has a chance of being hail or tornado.
Big. Yeah.
And so pretty much any storm, I got into the habit there when there was a storm that was coming, I would, even my UPS, I would unplug everything. Just unplug everything. I'm not going to mess with it. Just unplug it. I'm just not doing anything until the storm's over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good and safe. I've often thought about that. I have put a whole house UPS, something you probably wouldn't be able to do in an apartment, but I have a whole house UPS that they warranty, I don't know, $50,000 or $100,000, something like that in equipment. So I feel like, because I used to do the same thing. Listen, you're not that far south from me. I can be there in 6 hours.
Yeah.
And it goes, basically goes Tulsa, Topeka, Omaha in a straight line right up the Midwest. And those storms come straight up from Oklahoma City. Yeah. You get them. Thank you. Ryan, who's in Topeka, he gets them next, and then we get them after them. And we know that's not the way it works, but it's pretty close. So for a while, I too was unplugging things. We get a storm. I put the whole house surge protector on here, which they come and put a ground, and I feel pretty confident about that. But as we learned last week, I've been really trying to get down to a one UPS for all the equipment, right? And that's possible on a UPS battery backup from APC or Trip. What's the name of it? Tripline? No.
Triplite? No.
Triplite. Yeah, it is.
Is it Triplite? Okay.
Military's got a contract with them. Those were all in the military. Those were all the power strips we got were from them. Yeah. But I think now we're to the point where I can do this on one of these new solar generators. And so I talked about it with Marv last week. And what I need is about 600 to 900 watts total. And then with a solar generator, I get this idea, like those batteries in the UPSs are pretty small. The batteries in these solar generators, much larger. And so, I get about, on a 1200 watt inverter, I get about 1,000 watt hours. I'm using about 600 to 800, which means I get about 45 minutes then to cut things over.
Sure.
And that's with all my monitors. That's 9 monitors. That's crazy to think, right? Of like, wow, I could run things that long. So this week, Marv and I talked about it last week, but this week I went out. So on Friday, I just said, you know what? I'm going to figure this thing out. So on Friday, I picked up a portable power station from a company called Ugreen. Talked a little bit about this on Ask the Podcast Coach on last Saturday. It arrives tomorrow, and I'm super geeked out about it. Dan, to your point, this would be a great opportunity to install it slowly and get some good cable management in at this point. Because so a 1200 watt inverter, so plenty, it'll cover everything I need, all the computers that are down here. The goal was to be able to have one plug to unplug it and plug it into the generator, basically to cover me while I'm cutting over the house from grid power to generator power. 45 minutes. Yeah, I can do that in 45 minutes. And if it's going to be longer, I can always start shutting some monitors down to kind of
triage your monitors to serve.
They take a little bit. I mean, having 9 or 10 now, I think, is what I have. Takes a little bit of juice. But this Ugreen new company, they're like Anchor. They came from the battery. They came from the phone charging side of things, and then have started making these solar. Now they're calling them solar generators because you can power them with that. So I'm pretty pumped. It's got a light on it where here you can, when I lose power, I can just hit a button, light comes on. Light will stay on in emergency mode. So even if the batteries are mostly depleted, light will still work, which is kind of cool. You can charge your cell phones, and I'm going to use it as a charging station here. I'll primarily use it as a pass-through, though. So it's going to be on the grid most of the time, passing the power through. The battery, if the power goes out, it's got a 20 millisecond cutover. So just like a UPS, everything else should stay up long enough for me to make the cutover. It's a little weird thinking I'm buying a portable power station to be fixed in the basement. And in theory, in the future, say we did have an emergency and I needed to use this for something else, I could just power down my computers, unplug the 3 plugs that I have plugged into this thing, all those power strips, and take it with me. Right. So I don't know what, as I show this to you, what do you think? What kind of questions do you have, or does it raise any questions for you?
Well, the first thing, I think I have some batteries from Ugreen for my camera. I think I've got some.
I bet you do.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's 2 questions that I'd have initially. One, you kind of addressed with the portability. Like usually things that are mobile and portable end up costing a little bit more. And so do they have a solution that's, can do the same thing if you're not going to be moving it around? And then the other part is, you talk about the 9 monitors. My question is, are you powering basically your setup there? Or are you powering the entire house? Oh yeah,
that's a great question. Thanks for that clarification. Yeah, no, just the computers. This is only designed to get my computers. So fridges and that kind of stuff, boy, a fridge can go a couple hours without power, and everything will stay cold in it. We actually have HelloFresh cold packs in the freezer that we can move around.
That's your backup for that.
That's my backup. HelloFresh cold packs. No, they work great, right? You freeze them, they're flat.
Use them, yeah.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah.
So in theory, I can keep the fridges running for a while. Now, it is powerful enough. Let's just say, for example, I needed to go full solar, like if my generator crapped out, my gas generator, and I need to go full, this thing would run my fridges for at least a half a day. I have 2. So I would shut the computers down. The priority is food, not computers. But so I'd shut the computers down. I'd take the solar generator, plug the fridges in after a couple hours. And in theory, I could run some solar panels out and charge it that way if I wanted to. That's pretty extreme, and I'm not a prepper. I'm not getting ready for the end of the world, and there's not going to be zombies. But it's just one of those things, like here in the Midwest, you're just talking about this. We get these storms from time to time.
Yeah.
And it drives me, there's a couple things that drive me crazy. And one of them is knowing my food is spoiling. Like I can't take it. I lose my mind. And so having that peace of mind, this solar generator from Ugreen, $1,000 retail, they're running $200 off. That coupon code is super easy to use, and I'll put it in the show notes. I don't have an affiliate link. Dave was like, set up an affiliate link on Saturday when we were talking about this. And I'm like, I haven't even tested it yet. Like, I don't
do you want to?
I don't know if I'm recommending this, but it works so well from a gadget perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to completely replace your UPSs with that, or okay?
Yes.
Okay.
So it will be one
instead of-
UPS. Yeah.
What are you going to do with the other UPS? Is that for the fridge then?
Well, one broke. Yeah,
Oh,
one broke. This is the decision process I had to make.
Oh,
Was
okay.
like, I'm going to spend $250 on another UPS.
Yeah.
Like, should I just be? And the other UPS is the same age, so you're like, okay. And I've replaced the batteries 3 or 4 times in both of them, and you're like, okay, at some point they're going to go.
Yeah.
And so I'm $500 in. Do I want to do something different? And I looked at one of the pure sine wave UPSs that I need for the generator, because the cheap UPSs can't run off a generator. The power signal's not good enough, and it trips the breaker every time, right?
Okay.
So I need a good one. What's $900? And for one I would need, and it wouldn't last but 20 minutes, maybe 15, in case of a power. The one I was looking at, the $900 one I was looking at, gave me 15 minutes of time. This gives me almost an hour. This has a 5-year warranty, and the batteries are the lithium phosphate, whatever they are. I forget the name of those. They're rated for 3,000 cycles. So that's
okay.
If I cycled it every day, which I won't in this case, but if I did,
does it drain it at all as you're using it as a pass through?
No, it's a complete pass through. There's there's some battery, but you're not drawing it down and bringing it up and drawing it down and bringing it up. Right. It just stays charged. That's not always the best. There will probably be, I'll probably from time to time disconnect it and let it charge down, and then plug it back in and let it charge back, just to test it.
Yeah, that would be my thing is, I mean, it's great. And then when you actually need it, Well,
the question will be, and I'll want to know, how much time do I have?
Yeah.
So I'll get things powered up in a normal situation, and I'll just unplug it. And then because listen, I've lost my computers. If they just shut off, it's not the end of the world. Everything recovers just fine. I don't have files sitting out there waiting. I'm not like you, where I might have big edits and then be in the middle of something where a power outage, I might lose a bunch of stuff,
Even then, software these days does a pretty good job of recovering most things. I've found. I mean, there's times, but
I think we've gotten to that point. So I'll at some point. So it comes in tomorrow. I'll do some cable management to get some things. It's got 3 grounded outlets in it.
Are you going to prioritize those? Like just thinking of you have the monitors, right? So like outlet number 1, if I need more time, I unplug this, and that is the first 5 monitors to give me more time. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that is a great idea. Yeah, no, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, I should.
Put a little thing. This will buy you an extra 15 minutes. This will buy you an extra.
Yeah. No, well, certainly there's there's things I probably don't need that I can say, okay, in this situation, unplug this. Everything else will keep running. So, power goes down, and then you need a few minutes to kind of figure out, okay, is it going to come back up?
Yeah.
And then think, okay, it's going to take me X number of minutes to get the generator fired up and plugged in. For me, I when the power went down 2 weeks ago, it's about a 20-minute job for me to get things up and running. But I love that idea of then thinking through and marking those wires with unplug this one first, because these are non-critical monitors. Like the work monitors could probably be on the one that gets unplugged first. Yeah. Right. It's a good idea.
I'll be curious.
It's a really good idea.
When you get that set up, I'll be really curious. Also from a sound perspective, UPS generally don't, thinking of, from a recording perspective too, like it doesn't really pick up that much. But something more powerful, if there's something there that is more, I'll be curious. That's always something I'm conscious of, adding extra noise into this room.
Me too. Yeah, and I have a little bit in here. It's not too bad, but since it's only passing through in most cases, it shouldn't invoke the fan, right? The battery should stay pretty cool. We'll see. We'll see. I'll report back.
Yeah, I'll be really curious to hear how that goes.
Yeah, I'll report back. This is one of those things I'm kind of excited about. I was like, ooh, this is going to be, anytime I can consolidate, anytime I can organize, it felt pretty good for you to get your cables organized.
Yeah.
anytime, because I just, power is one of those things for me, like electricity, I should say, is one of those things for me. I want to make sure it works, so.
Yeah. And it is a great chance, almost like moving. I mean, you're essentially moving things to a new outlet. So you're essentially moving things, and it's a good chance to organize things and make sure that you have things the way that you want them set up. It's a good chance to slow down to do that.
Yeah. And you can, you can. When I consolidated down, I used to have 4 or 5 UPSs, and I consolidated everything down to 2 big ones. I kind of took my time and labeled some things and labeled the ends of the cables. Hey, this goes to this power strip, one on the end, one on the power strip. So I kind of knew, because you forget that stuff.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And so I kind of did some of that. So I kind of know where things are now, but this will certainly simplify when the power goes down. I literally just, take the generator out, turn it on, plug the generator into the house, plug the extension cord into the outlets that are in the house, bring it back here, plug the solar generator or the UPS into that. And I'm kind of hoping I don't miss a beat.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of the key. The rest of the house is all, I move a few plugs around and things come on, and we have enough fans we have emergency lights. We're a little crazy. We have emergency lights, little pop-up lights that, like little gadget lights that you just pop them up and they come on.
Okay.
We've got those around the house. You can just grab one and, if the power goes off. So, So I'm kind of excited to be here tomorrow, and I'll spend, I probably won't do it before Ask the Podcast Coach on Saturday. I'll probably get through that and then do it Saturday night or so. I do need, the first thing I'm going to do is take the generator out, start it, plug this thing into the generator to make sure it's not popping the circuit on the generator.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I need to do on my generator is ground it. I've got one of those portable generators. You can just wheel it around, but what people don't realize is that's not grounded. And so, right, if in our world, if electricity's got to go somewhere, it's going to go, if it's going to hit and go out, it's going to take the path of least resistance, which sometimes is your networking equipment. And so, so the other thing I need to do is install a ground out where I store the generator, so that when I bring the generator out, I can just bring the clip over, just ground it and be done with it, type deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we get a surge and it's going to go out that way, it's going to go back out through the generator and down into the ground, type deal.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like you've got it all, the plan figured out. It's one of those things of be curious. Yeah, that's always how it goes, right? Will it actually work? And are you planning on, what sort of tests are you planning on running before plugging your sensitive equipment into it? Or are you just going to?
Well, no, I think I'm just going to plug them in and fire
just test on production. Just go.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. I got a couple machines that I use pretty much just for crypto stuff that probably bring those up first.
Okay.
Because if I lose those, it's not the end of the world. I don't want it frying my Mac Mini.
Right.
Right. So
I mean, it'd be an expensive lesson.
Yeah.
On that if it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully it doesn't, but yeah.
It's a pretty good piece of equipment. I've seen a lot of tests with it. There's quite a few YouTube videos out there.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about it, but that's another good point of thinking through the order of operation of okay, because I can put it in and I can move things over in blocks.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's good point. Dan, thanks for coming on tonight. What's coming up? I think you're on Chernobyl 3, so we have 4 and 5 still coming. Anything else you want to highlight on?
The first episode after the Chernobyl series, episode 5 is coming out next week, and then the next thing, I'm doing something a little bit different. I had a chance to chat with George Stevens Jr., who is he worked on the Diary of Anne Frank from 1959. He's a classic Hollywood guy. So had a chance to chat with him, not just about the historical accuracy of a movie, but some of the history of Hollywood itself. So it's fascinating to get to talk to him and try try a little bit of a, something different and see how that goes.
That's good. We're always looking for something different to do sometimes. You're like, I've done this for a while. It'd be kind of interesting. The history of Hollywood, it's a make-believe industry.
Yeah.
And so who knows what the real history is sometimes. You hear these things behind the scenes and you kind of think, did that really happen? And
well, it's fascinating. I mean, just to give a little bit of insight into some of the conversation we had. So his father, also George Stevens Sr., landed on the beaches of Normandy during D-Day, and he was the one that was shooting footage during tasked by Eisenhower to shoot footage during the war in Europe. So some of his footage, like visiting Dachau and concentration camps, like proved the Holocaust happened in Nuremberg, and then after the war, George Stevens Jr., the man that I interviewed, found some of the color footage that his father shot that was just kind of behind the scenes stuff that nobody had ever seen. All the stuff that was officially shot was black and white, and they colorized it later on. But, so just fascinating, some of these things of, how Hollywood has been involved in history and those different aspects. And so it was a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to hearing what people think of it.
As a photographer, would you be interested in filming a conflict, a military conflict behind the scenes, or would you rather just stay away from it altogether?
Well, I haven't really been shot at in war, but I don't know that I would be a fan of that.
Yeah.
I think another aspect of it, something like World War II, it's one of those things where I don't know if I could. I guess I didn't ask this question but I don't know if anybody could say ahead of time, like, yes, I want to do that. I don't think anybody really wants to do that, but it's, it's a duty. And when when the entire world is at war, do you step up and you do what you're called to do, what the world is asking you to do? I don't think anybody really chose. I mean,
well, I do. I mean, I do think of people going to document civil wars, or they go, right. They purposely put themselves in harm's way to document.
Yeah.
And they do it willingly, or they do it out of.
I think it's important. It's important to document that kind of stuff. Like in the example of, the fellow that I talked to, if his father had not documented some of those things that happened in the concentration camps, it was like he edited it together afterwards for the trials at Nuremberg, to prove that these things happened. It wasn't just things, reports that people were saying, like, here's the footage, the documented proof that these atrocities happened. And sometimes we need to be able to see those things. So it is important for sure. Whether or not I would do that, I would like to think that I would. I also would like to hope that I'm never in the situation where I would have to. Yeah.
Well, and you think of things like that movie from the 80s or 70s, Capricorn 1, with the whole premise was that it never really happened. And of course, they used Hollywood to cover it up, or to make it not covered up, but to make it seem like it happened. Right. And so you have some of that sometimes in these situations. You have some of the, oh no, that was make believe. That actually, even though we have it on film, that was just Hollywoodized, or that was just, that was just made up. So I always, it's
with
hard.
With AI, it'll be interesting too. I mean, with that moving forward, I think we're reaching with audio and video, something that photos have been for a while, like with the advent of Photoshop and that, and in that. And so I think it will be interesting to see the steps in place that technology will be able to determine what was automatically generated, what has been edited, what has been there. Some of the metadata, I would assume, is how they would do that kind of thing, for generation to tag that. But
for every AI generated, there should be an AI that can detect.
There should be. There should be.
I don't know if that's true.
There should be. I like the theory.
It sounds super optimistic. Who knows? Well, Dan, thanks for spending some time with me. Of course, Dan also sponsors the Coffee Pour on Ask the Podcast Coach on Saturday mornings, you can see the mug that we use. But thanks for that mug. By the way, that thing's lasting. That's awesome. I use that mug for everything. So thanks for.
I've got one too. I love it.
It's awesome.
It's
awesome.
great.
But you can join us on Saturday mornings, askthepodcastcoach.com/live, and you can get to that. Dan, can you hang out for 1 second while I close the show up? Is that okay?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Couple reminders on the way out. One, if you want to join us for the continued conversation or whatever you want, join us in Discord, theaverageguy.tv/Discord. Leave us a message like Kyle did at the beginning of the show, homegadgetgeeks.com. Just let me know that you left a message so that you can send me an email, jim@theaverageguy.tv, say, hey, I left a message. Although I did get the email that the message was left, so it was good. But I just like to cover my bases. Don't forget, get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people that you know and you trust. And of course, if you need a hosting plan, Christian's got you covered. Check it out, maplegrovepartners.com. He's got plans for as little as $10 a month to get you started. We mentioned it a few times, but if you're not eating very well, either HelloFresh is the way to go. I have a code. Head out to theaverageguy.tv/HelloFresh. Get $110 off your. That's a lot of money off your first 5 boxes, and give it a try. It's changed the way I eat, and I eat a lot better, and I've learned to actually cook a lot better than I have in the past. Check it out today. theaverageguy.tv/HelloFresh. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern. By the way, Nathaniel sent me a note this week, Lindley, and said, hey, whatever you do, don't quit. I really like it. So we'll keep going, Nathaniel, just for you. And I'm not saying that. I mean, I appreciate that. It sometimes, Dan, you know this. You send the stuff out into the ether, and you're like, does anybody even care? Is anybody listening? And so always great to hear from folks. Next week is my birthday week, and I'm taking the week off. So no show next week. I'm celebrating my birthday every day.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Cheers. Cheers to you as well. I'll be probably doing a few of these, maybe a few more than I should. Bob and Ryan are back the week after that from Think Computers. And we'll spend some time doing that. And then, of course, Gallup has their big summit the week after that. So couple on again, off again, but we're usually here every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. Join us live. Love to have you out there. Big thanks to John, who showed up, and Tony didn't. I'm kind of starting to think they're the same person because they're never in the same place at the same time. It's like
Superman and Clark Kent. They're never in the same room at the same time.
Are they really separate identities on Twitter? I'm not sure. They talk to each other on Twitter, but maybe it's the same. Maybe it's the same person. So Tony, John, you guys would shock me if you actually came to the show together for a change. Brian was here a little bit earlier. KDJ came out and joined us. Uncle Marv did as well. We'd love to see you. Come out and join us. If you're listening live, we probably won't do much of a post show because it's kind of late. But with that, we'll say goodbye.